A neglected tropical disease is a disease of the poor. That means that it is a disease that affects mostly vulnerable populations in the tropical and subtropical countries. It affects the most vulnerable sectors of the society. So these sectors do not have political voice to raise attention to these diseases. In the year 2017, the World Health Organization included snakebite envenoming in its list of neglected tropical diseases. And this was a very big step forward because this created an international attention to this problem. Vulnerable communities in rural settings. This is the main group affected by snakebite envenoming because a number of bites, the majority, occur in the agricultural fields where people are working. But in addition to that, some bites occur around the residences and even inside the residences. So they may affect also the people, the families of these people.
En Costa Rica, los trabajadores agrícolas representan el 47% de las personas mordidas en el país, y eso significa que ellos son los que están más expuestos porque trabajan en el campo, en zonas donde hay alta proliferación de serpientes y zonas donde la frontera agrícola, es decir, donde la utilización de tierra para cultivo se ha extendido cada vez más hacia el hábitat de los animales silvestres. Entonces hay más choque entre seres humanos y serpientes y otro tipo de animales. Las consecuencias físicas van desde amputaciones de cuerpo, ¿verdad? Como piernas o brazos, o inmovilidad en algún área del cuerpo. También pues hay secuelas psicológicas, ¿verdad? Por ejemplo, personas que desarrollan un miedo a las serpientes y ya no quieren regresar a trabajar el campo porque el miedo que tienen a sufrir una nueva mordedura es muy grande. También sueños reiterativos con serpientes, con el momento en el que sufrieron la mordedura, es una cosa que suele suceder. Y en términos socioeconómicos, pues las personas que no tienen acceso a una indemnización mensual durante el periodo en el que están inhabilitados para trabajar, tienen vivencia en ella, es la persona y su familia una desmejoría en sus condiciones de vida, en la dificultad para acceder a alimento, acceder a vivienda, poder enviar a sus hijos e hijas a los centros educativos, y cuando se vuelve permanente, pues la condición es todavía más complicada, ¿verdad? Porque la fuente de ingresos deja de estar para siempre en el hogar y se recarga sobre otras personas del núcleo familiar, por ejemplo los hijos, que muchas veces tienen que salir del sistema educativo para poder buscar trabajo y compensar económicamente la ausencia del salario del papá o la mamá que no pudo retornar al trabajo por una mordedura de serpiente.
So these diseases constitute a vicious cycle of poverty. Another element of neglected tropical diseases is that they have received very little attention from international research agencies and agendas. It doesn't receive, the study of these diseases doesn't receive much funding. And then also it has received very little attention from the big pharmaceutical companies. So although all of these factors make a neglected tropical disease, and so snakebite fits very well into this scenario. The potential markets for antivenoms are countries with low economic development and affect impoverished population with low economic capacity to purchase these drugs. So it's not economically profitable for these companies compared to other pharmaceutical products that they can produce and market. Favafric was an excellent antivenom manufactured by Sanofi Pasteur, a very well-known big pharmaceutical company with long tradition in the preparation of antivenoms. It was probably the best antivenom being used in Africa. And at some point around the year 2015, the company decided to stop the production of this antivenom because it probably wasn't profitable enough for the interests of the company. But it was the decision of Sanofi Pasteur was an example of how a drug that saved lives in poor environments was stopped suddenly, and it created a vacuum in the availability of antivenoms.
No es rentable, es que el suero antiofídico no es rentable. Si uno se pone a ver, o sea, para el engranaje que tenés que tener, estamos hablando de un producto que es parenteral, tiene que inyectarse en un humano. Los estándares tienen que ser altísimos.
Basically, antivenoms are made by first collecting venoms from snakes. The venoms vary between different species. Antivenoms are produced against a specific species. In the case of Costa Rica, we use a combination of the venoms from the Ferdinands, the Central American rattlesnake, South American rattlesnake, and the bushmaster. So with this mixture of venoms, we inject relatively low doses of these venoms into horses along several months. The doses are low as to avoid inflicting harm in the health of horses. The horse develops an immune response. This immune response means that the horse synthesizes many molecules of antibodies against these venom components, which are circulating in the blood of the horses. So after this period of immunization, the horses are bled, and again the volume of blood obtained from the horse is low enough as not to affect the physiology of these animals. We purify the antibodies from the blood of the horses, and then finally what you have in a vial of antivenom is a solution containing antibodies from a horse that was injected with snake venoms. And these antibodies, when somebody is bitten by a snake, these antibodies are injected intravenously and they neutralize. That means they block the toxins injected by the snake, and therefore they avoid the development of complications in the person that has been bitten by a snake. It's not cheap, it's complex because it involves having a collection of snakes, having a farm with horses, and having a pharmaceutical laboratory that fulfills the good manufacturing practices. All the different aspects demand specific costs because in the production, for instance, you need to invest heavily in equipment, sophisticated equipment, the building of laboratories, and of course reagents and so on. And of course, it demands the presence of qualified people all along the process. In Costa Rica, we all the time we aim to reduce the cost of production so that the price for the final user, in this case ministries of health or social security systems, is not too high. I would say in Costa Rica, snakebite envenoming is not a neglected disease, has not been neglected. Since the first decades of the 20th century, our country studied this problem and developed solutions for this problem. There is a tradition in the study and the search for solutions to snakebite envenoming in Costa Rica since the early 20th century. So the country has this facility to study and to develop and produce antivenoms. But more than that, the country has been able to develop a robust public health system, institutions. So, for example, we have the social security system, the Caja de Seguro Social, which has a universal coverage in the country. So it has plenty of hospitals, clinics, primary healthcare facilities all over the country. And antivenoms manufactured in this institute are distributed throughout the public health system.
Sabemos que en el caso del envenenamiento por serpientes, el tiempo es un factor muy importante. Entre más rápido ese paciente sea atendido, más rápido vamos a tener una neutralización de esos venenos, de esas toxinas. Claramente, esto lo que significa es que tenemos que tener acceso muy rápido al antiveneno. ¿Y cómo lo logramos? Bueno, una forma de hacerlo es teniendo clínicas que están cada vez más cerca de la población, aún en puntos rurales. Comparado con otros lugares, o sea, cuando vemos la geografía de Costa Rica, que es un país pequeño, y la cantidad de centros de estos que están distribuidos, o sea, realmente hemos hecho una labor encomiable.
La medicina cada vez ha ido llegando a los pueblos. En cada pueblo hay un EVAIS o una clínica o un puesto de salud que hay un médico ahí. Entonces, ahora toda mordedura es atendido por médicos. si necesita traslado hospitalario, lo hacen vía aérea. Si son pueblos alejanos como Telire, si hay una mordedura allá, pues coordinan desde de la clínica de allá, trasladarlo en un helicóptero hasta el hospital de Limón.
Creemos que la parte educativa es muy importante para lograr prevenir y para lograr reducir los casos graves, digamos, o las repercusiones graves por mordeduras de serpiente. Sí, el instituto ha desarrollado desde sus inicios un programa de extensión docente, es decir, es el programa educativo que tiene el instituto en comunidades, sobre todo en comunidades donde hay una alta probabilidad de sufrir mordeduras por serpiente. Entonces capacitamos a la población en general sobre qué hacer y qué no hacer en caso de sufrir una mordedura de serpiente. Y también tenemos un programa de capacitación para el personal médico en el que los compañeros y compañeras microbiólogos les explican cómo debe ser una atención correcta de un paciente mordido por serpiente, ¿verdad? ¿Cuál es la sintomatología? ¿Cuánto es la cantidad de dosis de suero antiofídico que debería ser aplicada? ¿Cuáles son las pruebas que se deben de hacer para tener un entendimiento rápido de qué es lo que está pasando con el paciente, etcétera? Hemos desarrollado, sí, un par de libros en idioma bribri y en idioma novel, con el fin de que la población indígena del país también tenga acceso a la información sobre cómo prevenir y cómo actuar al momento de ser mordido por serpiente.
En otros, principalmente en lugares ya más remotos, hay personal médico que viaja a esos lugares, a esas comunidades, a brindar servicios que llamamos de acción social. Ese tiene un carácter más de capacitación sobre cómo prevenir el accidente ofídico a partir de educar a la gente sobre la biología de las serpientes, ¿verdad? Y la necesidad de trasladar a los pacientes a centros médicos.
We have highly qualified health professionals. So this group of people are very well trained in the diagnosis and treatment of snakebite envenoming. So the combination of a wide and robust public health system, highly qualified public health staff, and the presence of an institute that produces antivenom for the needs of the country and other countries in the region ensures that Costa Rica has a good coverage of this problem, and this explains the drop in the mortality inflicted by snakebite envenoms in our country. The model is based on a strong public commitment to solve health issues. This is a typical health issue that should be mainly approached and solved by the public system. It cannot be solved by a private health-oriented system, because usually a private health-oriented system is based on economic profitability. So this is an example, in my opinion, of why the development and use of drugs cannot be viewed only from the market profitable philosophy or perspective. I mean, we are talking here about saving human lives, and when you are dealing with a health problem like that, you should see the development of drugs and the distribution of drugs from a more humane, social-oriented perspective, not from an exclusively economically profitable perspective. And this is a philosophical issue that is running in our world in general, not just for antivenoms, but many other drugs. We witnessed this situation with the vaccines against COVID-19. So it's the time to think what is the purpose of pharmaceutical development, what is the goal of the development of drugs, who should be benefited with the development of medicines, antivenoms and other medicines as well. The science and technology should work for the well-being of people. More than being an issue of profitability, it should be an issue of guaranteeing the right to live and to have a life with dignity, and to avoid a premature death due to a problem like snakebite envenoming.